Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jackie Perkins. I'm a Quaker and member of New South Wales Regional Meeting, one of the participating organisations involved with this special event. It's my very great pleasure to introduce Morrow to you, whom I've known for many years. Ro, also a Quaker, is one of the world's adventurous souls. Her passport would be bulging with entry stamps and visas from so many different countries in her travels over the decades she's worked with permaculture. But each of the countries have two things in common: a lack of resources and infrastructure in that country, and a population unable to feed itself sufficiently, so that permaculture courses which she teaches would aid the communities in achieving food security. Ro originally trained as an agricultural scientist, and the notion of her being in a laboratory or conducting scientific crop trials seems too tame an occupation for her satisfaction. Permaculture training for her began in 1985, and it wasn't too long before she was teaching courses to refugees in Hong Kong, to rural communities in Vietnam and Kampuchea, which eventually became Cambodia, where landmine clearance was happening alongside the fields where they were training. And at a time when communications were erratic at best, a phone call back to Quaker Service Australia meant finding a phone box, and travelling around on potholed roads in a very overcrowded vehicle with people, farm produce and animals was the norm. Quakers, or to give them the correct title, the Religious Society of Friends, is a Christian faith not given to proselytising and guided by the testimonies of simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality and earth care. All of these are aspects of how Ro works within a community, sharing her knowledge of permaculture in a way which is inclusive, encourages interaction, is very practical and active. And she encourages all participants to learn and share ideas as the course progresses. Her books are also practical, with helpful drawings to aid understanding, and she has generously enabled them to be translated into a range of languages to support the communities she has trained, enabling the trainees to train others in the region. But permaculture is not simply about growing food. It encompasses so much more. So whether you are in a refugee camp in Bangladesh, in rural Asian or African communities, among Afghan communities where she was until COVID, you'll find Ro has much knowledge to share. And I hope you enjoy your time with her this morning and can easily see how permaculture has process and content, which leads to opportunities for increased peace within individuals and communities. So join with me on a journey of discovery with Ro Morrow.
Oh my goodness, Jackie, that's very, very difficult to live up to. And from my point of view, it wasn't like that at all. From my point of view, it was rather a sense that many people in the world do not have the opportunity to learn about permaculture, and at that stage to learn about climate change. It's not a choice for them. They can't look it up on the web and they can't go and do it. So once I had permaculture, I immediately thought of people who had no access to good knowledge and evidence. And I regard this as critical, the right to know. I put it in the UN human rights, the right to know, right to freedom of speech. So I think what started me was I had a very good toolbox. Agricultural science was too prescriptive. Permaculture was integrated and continued many disciplines. So I didn't actually think it was going to be the wild journey it is in retrospect. Jackie reminded me of stepping out of a car one day and someone saying, "Look out for the landmines." And I looked around and there was the skull and crossbones, which they marked every landmine before it was taken up. and driving the cliffs of Afghanistan where the road had fallen in and back onto the valley floor. There were some hair-raising adventures, but in those days you could do them and your organisation you worked for wasn't worried about your safety or didn't know. Another one I remember clearly was in Kampuchea, Cambodia, and I was to meet the head of Women's Affairs in one province, Persat, Empona, and she said, look, just catch a taxi from Phnom Penh, out halfway, get out and sit on this log, and I'll come and pick you up. So I caught a taxi with 10 other people. I paid for 2 seats, but I only got half of one. And we travelled over this potholed slalom road, swinging round potholes and up and down and through them, past several accidents and cars with broken wheels, and finally arrived there and the taxi driver sort of said, out you get. This was in the days when the Khmer Rouge were really operating. They were not just in a remote area, they were actually on this road and cutting the road, and the taxi drove away. And at that time, an Australian, 2 English people had been taken hostage, and actually QSA had insured me for $1 million. I encouraged my friends to take me hostage and we'd share the profit. They never did. So I was sitting there on the road, and finally our project officer, Empona, drove up and I said, oh, how did you know I'd be safe? Do you know the Khmer Rouge? Do you help the women, the Khmer Rouge families? Oh no, she said, the monk at the pagoda told me you'd be all right. It was a funny moment because there were a lot of atrocities and I wasn't sure. So every trip and every place I've been, there's been a story like that. So I am really heavily motivated and strongly motivated about the coming disasters in the world and your rights and our rights to have good information to act on and good information that we can rely on. That's part of the injustice. So I want to start today with an acknowledgement of country. And instead of doing it, I have tried to learn 2 languages because I'm in Katoomba in the Blue Mountains and I sit on the edge, you know, up on Katoomba, and on this side is Gundungurra and on this side is Darug. So I've tried to learn the welcomes in both languages. So in Darug, because I think we need to hear the Indigenous languages. So in Darug, it's Waramai, Nalawa, Mitiga. Waramai, Nalawa, Mitiga. And the invitation to you today is, hello, come in and sit down, friends. And then in Gundungurra, it's Yangu Mandu, Jini Yadangi. And that's slightly different. Perhaps should skip at the end. That's thank you for coming today. And both those greetings to people, I think, are so courteous and gracious. And of course, what we know is 60,000 years of living in relationship with the stars and the white ants and the scorpions and the spiders, all our brothers and sisters, all the different ecosystems, the clouds, the wind, all seen as brother and sisters, enabled people to monitor their behaviour and not damage it. And I hope profoundly that we could get to that situation ourselves. So that's really a double welcome, acknowledgement of country, I hope. All right, so I just would like to talk to you about the session today. I've tried to summarise nearly 40 years of working in developing countries and more recently in refugee camps. And I suppose, as Jackie mentioned, it was in Vietnam that I first saw the potential for peace. And it was because in a class in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, we had people who'd been on the south and people from the north in the same class. And when I came into the classroom, they were divided. The people in the North Vietnam were there and the South Vietnam were there. Remember, this was very early days, and Vietnam was just coming out of its long, unjust, brutal, immoral war. So what we had was the people, the absolute physical representation of what civil war does and how it divides a country. And it was pretty awful. So instead of just delivering a course and content that would work on cleaning water and getting abundant food growing, we did something quite different. We started to teach people to work in groups. So deliberately, I'd look around the class and I'd do a count and then divide people up. So people from both experiences were mixed up in the class, and then I'd give them a neutral topic, totally neutral. What can we do about grey water? What can we do about polluted drinking water? How can we save clean water? How can we clean it? And for a while, sitting in the groups, you can imagine people sitting, then they'd look at each other and they'd start. And after a while, I'd say, what we're learning now, the arts of peace to rebuild the environment. And this is a powerful tool. By the end, they were best friends with each other. They were really finding things in common because they accepted the common goal to rebuild their society and rebuild a peaceful society and environment. So this is what was happening. So what was useful in this and made it successful was we didn't just go in and teach individuals, we taught by departments. So the women's department or the environment department or a whole province such as Persa. And then we got those people then having no in-service training at all. You can imagine there's no in-service training, there's no Wi-Fi, no way of learning. How do you reveal, how do you look after a country that's got 30 million bomb holes? So they took permaculture as their curriculum and way of teaching. And on a way, we were launched. On the way, they changed it. They did it their way. And I think that is when you know you're probably getting somewhere and the information's useful. Yeah. So we had people make changes to the course. And in Cambodia, it was particularly successful because we also trained trainers. And then they went out and they taught trainers in other provinces. And gradually, especially Svadieng, which was called the White Skirt Zone. White Skirt Zone translates into English. No, White Skirt Zone in Vietnamese English translates into no man's land. So it's completely bombed, completely mined, such as exists between North and South Korea, utterly bombed and mined, and people thought it would never be recovered. So when they'd exploded all the bombs, then the trainers went out and taught people permaculture. What took me 3 years of constant visits, because it's not just in and out for 2 weeks and disappear. What took me 3 years, they did in 12 months. Okay, so that was happening, but I'd like at the moment to talk about permaculture and peace. And for that, peace is often institutionalized, violence is institutionalized and takes many forms. However, permaculture and peace, someone said to me in another session, permaculture and peace, that's just gardening. And so I'd be interested for you who are here today to talk about and put into the session some words that you've got into the chat room. And my friend Ruth, who you'll see up here, is going to have a look at the chat room while we continue talking. So can you think about permaculture and peace and just flash into the chat room the sorts of things that come to mind for you if you think about it? Right, so what do you think of when you think of peace? There we are. Yep. So we're sure to have some necessities of life, aren't we, to meet life's needs? What else can you think of? Even if you don't know, have a go, because it's better to be in it than outside. Oh. Okay, so, and you can have two if you want to. Because we normally think of peace by governments or cooperation or education, but perhaps there are other roads to peace. I strongly believe this is one. So I'd love you to just keep adding what you think could be there. Some people know. Done some work. Yeah. I just mentioned a session the other day on the law and justice, and that is another way that's extremely powerful. But this is the grassroots movement. And I think you know that throughout the world at this moment, there are probably 6,000 permaculture courses taking place to people everywhere. Marvellous. We'll give you a couple of minutes more if you need them. And then I'll ask Ruth Harvey, who's worked in the refugee camps with me and been a key person in doing the reports jointly. Wow, goodness. It's a big ask, isn't it? Are you looking through them yourselves? If you'd like to react to someone, please do. If you want to have a reaction to what someone else has done. Okay. Yes, so if you think about it, permaculture is often seen as a physical content-based. However, there are other ways we can teach peace with permaculture. We'll give you about a few seconds more, I think, because it's slowing down, and then ask Ruth to talk to some of the topics. Ruth, are you able to do that in a minute? Wow.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
So, yeah, okay. I'm here on Dharawal land. So just reading through all these, there's so many, but talking about a lot about sharing, connection, harmony, and diversity, freedom. Interesting. Food security and having some income when selling excess produce. So food security comes through, respect for Mother Nature. So again, that's harmony, working with nature, interconnectedness again. A lot about nature and the environment. Not going hungry, somebody says, as a former refugee. Freedom from abuse and fear. I guess that's coming through sharing and having community, reconciliation and ongoing understanding. So yeah, there's a lot about food and sharing and connection to nature here. Playing music together is nice. Yeah.
So I think some of the things that we could add to that at the moment are the importance of traditional and the knowledge that people bring. So if we're talking about Syrian refugees, they brought enormous farming knowledge, absolutely terrific. They're good farmers, Syrians, and they're sitting in the refugee camps unable to use their skills. So they were really, really quite terrific in their contribution. If we're thinking of the Rohingya, the Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, then what was interesting, at one stage we say to people, okay, quick, form groups. Now I'd like you to write down all the plants in your area and all the uses. Within 3 minutes, they'd listed 160 trees, and for each one, there were 5 or more uses of the trees. As we're mainly Australians, I think we're Australians, if you go out to a eucalypt forest today, can you name all the trees and 5 or 6 uses for everyone? So what I realised is the gap between our knowledge of the environment and the knowledge that others have that keep it safe and well. So there is a thought in permaculture, not only do we put the environment first, but we put first people at the heart of what we study, which doesn't mean we have to accept every practice that we mightn't agree with, such as in Afghanistan today. But it does mean where there is good sound knowledge, we're going to embrace that. Was there anything else there, Ruth, that you wanted to add?
Well, there's the idea of self-sufficiency, not being dependent on outside resources. That's a factor in that. It gives you more, yes, a sense of you're not being at the effect of other forces.
Yeah, so in Western countries, people don't see the need to meet, don't see an importance to meet their own needs so much. In the global South, they're onto it immediately. Give someone a seed, by the end of the course, they brought you a seedling in a cup and it's this big, it's appeared. So what we're talking about then is the importance of the information for some people and not others. I think COVID is actually telling the world we need to go more for bioregional self-sufficiency and autonomy, because as the distribution networks get broken down or relationships broken down, we are so vulnerable. We are extremely vulnerable for not meeting some of our needs. So this is known widely by the global South, but less by the others. And the big differences I noticed in the global South, people talk about we. In the rich North, they talk about me and I, and self-fulfillment, not community fulfillment. So these are two big lessons that I've taken away, and I'm really interested to push the from me to we for all of us, because we are going to enter a difficult period in the future. Okay, does anyone want to add one more comment there? Transportable skills from this was really good. When you learn permaculture, you take it with you in your head and in your hands. It's not something you require lots of equipment that you can't travel without it, or you don't need a car. You can put your pack on and you can go and you've got it. Okay, so now if you're willing, we would like to talk about, we would like to have a look at a PowerPoint. Are you, I'm used to talking to real live people. The nice thing about this is you're not wearing masks. The difficult thing is that I'm not getting the lovely class responses. Anyway, we are going to have a look at the, look at this. So permaculture and peace. So I'd just like you to answer questions for yourself as I go through and see how you feel about this. So let's talk about the first, no, the cover, please, James, if you don't mind. Would be all right. Right, so have a look at this. Where do you think that might be in the world? Okay, it's in northwest India. It's in Kashmir. Did you know there are more than 100,000 special troops in Kashmir? That the Kashmiri are hostage in their own land? They've lost their autonomous status. They've lost the right to land. They live under curfew. There are soldiers on every street, and that the whole economy is utterly collapsed. The economy of tourism, of fishing in the lake, and that the forests are going as both Chinese and Indians take the timber and the animals. It's a sad story, but let's look at it, because in Kashmir, I was invited to teach a course at the Agricultural University, and they brought in a range of people, which is lovely, because in permaculture we have farmers and village people, we have university professors, and we just mix everyone up and they all work together. So this is Kashmir, and it sends a pain through my heart because war has destroyed that country. The water is polluted, the boats are destroyed, the people are dispirited, and India is sending huge numbers of people up there, and colonialism, of course, is alive and thriving. What I fear is one day they will be a minority group in their own country. So we were invited there, and I'll tell you about this as we go, because it's really exciting, and what has happened since has been wonderful. Okay, please, James, the next slide. So, okay, you have done this. It's in the chat, and you have put it there. Permaculture addresses the violence of food insecurity, water insecurity, sanitation and health through meeting needs of people where they are. So if people are in a refugee camp or they're in a 5-story building, a tent, a container, a poor dusty village, we still get them to work on meeting their needs. And until recently, people thought this was impossible. But once it started to happen in refugee camps, we knew it could. Socially, building relationships. We've talked about this a little bit. It also happened with the Khmer Rouge families and the other Funsenpec and the Communist Party straight after they got peace in Cambodia, brought people together. We got people just to work in groups on neutral topics, and we had lots of laughter and fun, which we built in, and we treated everyone as having an equal voice. It does wonders. 2 weeks will transform a culture. Okay, so economically, I think you've referred to this, but what we can do is maybe not create it that everyone will have an income, but that everyone can substitute for having to earn money in some degree. So whether they're planting fruit trees, vegetable gardens, it means you don't have to buy. I was sensitized to this in Lesotho when I went to the market and I saw women sitting in the market, and in front of them they had 3 tomatoes and an onion and maybe a cucumber. They were selling the food from their garden, and that because they needed the money to buy rice. So either they grow more, eat it and sell and can still buy rice, or they can sell it all and buy rice. In Vietnam, the young girls and boys would cut the vegetables and pick them from the gardens and then go down to the bus station where taxis and buses of all ramshackle varieties, colours and sizes are, and they would sell vegetables. They made 40 cents a month, which was enough to buy more rice and feed the family. Not much, so we're not looking at massive amounts of money, we're looking at making life better. Environmentally, we're going to look at that a bit. Now, the mental violence done by war, and it's really bad in Afghanistan now because I'm having daily contact with people. But when we were teaching in Afghanistan, people felt they could do something, and they felt that they had some skill that was useful, and they put it to work. And so even if people take some beans and plant them in a pot or an old boot or hang it in an old water bottle at their door, they have an activity. Because if there's a big drought, if there's famine because of plagues, even now where people are immobile and have to stay home, if there's something they can do, they feel better. I just wonder if it works for you. Do you feel better if you do something with your hands? Feel better if you can just go and do something in the kitchen? This works with people who become immobilized because they can't move and their future is uncertain. Okay, so we're looking at habitat. We just say, get that UNHCR blanket and put it on your roof so the corrugated iron is not cooking you when the temperatures go to 50 degrees in Iraq. Simple things that people can use. We're not talking about going outside the environment and trying to get a lot of money. Culturally, we've talked about, and then verbally. Do you know the terms NVC? Someone just put them in the chat room if you know them. There are 2 things we teach in the class, and one is nonviolent communication and the other is nonviolent behaviour. So we do some hilarious role plays about who spilt the rice and someone shouts and wants to hit people. And then we do another one on how to resolve it. And then particularly for Westerners, we ask people to change their language a bit. So instead of saying, why did you do that? We're getting people to say, can you tell me what happened? What was happening here? Let me hear your story, instead of aggressive language and behaviour. By the end of the class, it's really good. And from the beginning, we say, are you listening to each other? Has everyone got a chance to speak? That's sort of my mantra. It's a wonder I'm not saying it to you. In fact, I will. Do you listen to each other? Have you got a chance to speak? Everyone equally. Thank you, James. So they're the things that we're looking at. Now, the things you won't see are the cultural, the non-violent communication, because they're process. So now have a look at that. If you like, pop them in the chat room. This is rebuilding Kabul in about 2004 after the last bombing. What's the violence that you see here, and what do you think could happen? I don't know if we should have people talking. I don't mind if people talk. What's the violence you see here? Just look for the signs. Where are the electricity poles and wires? Can you see them? So what does that mean people are heating with and cooking? Because it's very cold. It's thousands of meters high and fairly dry. Thank you. Yes, exactly. Well, actually, they're the rebuilt homes, Dina. They are the new homes. It was rubble. Yeah, dangerous buildings can slide, right? There's no water supply and there's no electricity, right? Yes, thank you. No vegetation, no shade, no garden, right? The other thing is actually very clever. They're all facing south, which is where the sun is. So that's pretty smart. And so if you look there, where do you think the toilet water goes? There's another lane in addition to the one, and people just throw it in the lane. And it just goes all the way down the steps. Thank you. Yeah, all the way down a lane like that. There's no treatment of sewage at all. And instead of electricity, they collect plastic and burn it, which is so shocking for health. I heard the number of people who die of air quality in Kabul each year, and it was terrifying. It was sort of 20,000 people. It was huge. And where do they work, do you think? Well, actually, they're probably day labourers. They go and stand in the middle of the street and hope someone will employ them. But they can carry your stuff home for the market. They can maybe carry someone or do something, but they have no water supply, so there could be taps through there. They have no water treatment. They have no electricity and no shade. And that's some of the better housing. So the violence there is the violence of hygiene, of services, and it's the impact of war, which we're familiar with. Okay, let's look at the next one, please, James. What do you think this is? Anyone can talk to that.
Well, it's pollution to the river.
Yeah, so all the sewage, this is actually the Kabul River, and all the pollution runs from the houses in little holes in those walls, from washing, from toilets into the river. And in addition, everyone throws everything into the river. Now, years ago in the early 70s, I was in Kabul going through to do a scholarship somewhere in Europe, and that river was clean and fresh and beautiful. Let's think about what's happened to the place in the meantime. And of course, this river goes down to Pakistan as well. So they brought their animals into town because it's dangerous outside. There is no garbage pickup. There's no garbage cleaning. Now, if you sit by that river for an hour or two, so imagine just sitting somewhere over the other side in the shade, you will see someone come along in boots and they'll be carrying a big stick like a staff, and they will be picking at that rubbish for anything valuable. A wire coat hanger, a little tin and anything, and they will put it on their cart and go through the streets of Kabul selling it. But it's not good. Further up, if you go upstream, sort of up towards the top, right? There's a bridge. And that bridge is a concrete bridge going over the river. And under the river are bodies of people just lying there, absolutely out of it with drugs, which are encouraged by the American Army as an income earning. And it's right beside a police force. So the violence is the violence of pollution of the environment, wreckage of the environment, lack of knowledge, lack of skills, lack of institution. Okay, we're getting to solutions after this, so don't leave yet. We will do solutions. Okay, please, James, next one. Okay, so what does permaculture deliver? Now, permaculture is not for armchair meditators. Hang on, not meditators, armchair philosophers. Permaculture asks you to actually act. And it delivers a set of ethics, and I think some of you know the ethics. First one, care of the earth, not care for the earth, care of the earth, which means that you nurture the earth. You don't just care for it and think it's beautiful, you actually take care. Get your hands in the dirt sometimes, admire a flower, look at the bush, see what's happening. The second ethic is care of people, because unless we care for people, we end up with a situation, good one, situation where we have people living as they do in Kashmir, Ethiopia, yeah. And then we have some principles. And the third, I'm sorry, everyone, and the third ethic is share your surplus. Share surplus and reduce consumption. Now think what would happen if the global north shared their surplus. We could share vaccines, we could share know-how, we could share materials, we could share. And it's really interesting how this share surplus and reduce consumption starts to cut into the lives of permaculturists in particular. They actually start practicing it. Suddenly things are being given away, not sold. People are starting to think of what it costs the environment instead of how much it cost. And there's a whole ethical economy, a fair economy for all built into permaculture. It's much harder for the global north to share and reduce consumption than it is for people in the global south. They share more willingly and happily. You know, we've got a lot of learning to do, I think. And ultimately, you can get to the gift economy, where you just give without thought of perhaps financial rewards. At the same time, we can't ask the child in Bangladesh to give away her surplus because she doesn't have any. So we have to at least say that surplus needs to be shared wherever it exists. Now that's information, and it's seeds, and it's plants, and it's money, and it's just sharing. And I've tried it, and it's very freeing. You feel terrific. Anyway, I'm not brilliant, but I've tried. Okay, now principles. These are things that are global. From North, South Pole, tropics, deserts, coastal communities, the principles are global. I'm not going to go through them because you'd get really bored and sick of my voice. But one strategy, for example, is catch and store energy. It's been going since the 1970s and we're still not catching and storing the CO2, are we? And we're not building really good solar houses out of natural materials. You know, catch and store energy would mean we would plant 10,000 trees for each of us this year. And this applies to all other countries. Strategies for regions, this means the hot, wet tropics or the dry tropics or cold areas or mountain areas, they share strategies, but we don't transfer strategies from regions. Let's have a quick look at Australia. So in Australia, the first fleet brought out sheep and wheat seed to make farms. Their idea was to bring the agriculture of Europe unchanged to Australia. And in so doing, you would have to change the whole landscape because they're not suited to this country. What would happen if we'd been settled by the Spaniards? We would have been olives, grapes, figs, carob, or the Mediterranean crops. What would have happened if we'd been occupied by the Chinese or the Japanese? Rice, pigs, papaya, a lot more tropical fruits. So in a way, the agriculture that is delivered is across regions, and it's often wrong for the region. So if you look at the agriculture now, they're trying to practice in the Amazon, clearing it for cattle. Come on, this isn't where you want to go. Cattle belong to pampas and grasslands. So we encourage people to stay within strategies for their region and to change their strategies to suit the region, not try to change the region to suit the strategy. So for example, California has given up irrigation because they understand why that's been bad for them, or that is the push to get rid of it. So a strategy needs to be suitable for regions. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, changing your mindset to how much you have to distort the country, or whether you're actually living within the resources and the potential of that place. Okay, and then we've got local techniques, how you make compost. Yes, how you make compost, you know, how you keep your chickens, how you keep your goats, you know, and how you live, their techniques. So permaculture, in a very friendly way, is actually delivering this through getting people to discuss whether it would work for them and how it would work. Sometimes we do role plays. We give people a principle and say, make a role play out of that without speaking, and we'll all guess what it is, so that we're able to embed the knowledge. Thanks, James. So are you all bored? Right. Now we're going for a trip. Here we are, we're in Greece, and we're on the wonderful island of Lesbos, only about 17 kilometers from Turkey, and most of these people have arrived there from Turkey. So it's a very big camp. There's Morrow camp, and then there's the day center. And we had Africans, and Afghans, and Syrians, and Jordanians, and everyone in the class. Then we were bringing them together to learn permaculture, where they'd have to apply what they're learning exactly in that camp there, but also be able to design for when they go back home or somewhere else. So they didn't actually have a room for us. So they emptied out the glass house, and you can see some of the plants at the back, and they emptied out all, and the seedlings on the left, and they gave us a room. And this is sort of a bit typical. We get given everything, and we're also able to bring together maybe people where there could be a little bit of animosity, you know, Shias and Sunnis, Christian, Islam, Christian. We've got Africans. We're trying to break down what happens in refugee camps, which is generally tiers. So at the top of the Syrians, and then the Afghans, and then the Africans. So when we have these groups, we bring them together. We're sure it works because we bring in some of the people from the local NGO working in the camp who invited us in. And we also try to bring in some of the local people, farmers from outside, the local, they're called lesbians from Lesbos. So we bring in the local farmers, the men and women, and we make a group so that when we leave, the NGO and the farmers can continue to work with refugees. And this was startlingly successful. We didn't know it would be, it was just common sense to make sure. It was successful because this camp was burnt down, including that room you see. Morrow was burnt down and the day centre was burnt down. And what happened was the local people who were on this course had homes and farms. They invited all the students to come and stay with them, live on their land and be there with them. So in terms of disaster, it's such a backup to have people locally and the local NGO people being equals on the course. They're all students together, and we say the teachers are all learning too. But by not creating a hierarchy of knowledge, who knows, experts and learners, but equality when the disaster hits. And this worked with the Rohingya too, because when there was a fire in their camp, they were able to work with the local villagers next door. So, you know, it's pretty simple conditions. We had huge winds and the ceiling was blowing off at that moment. You can see it in the top corner, the laser lights going. And it crashed and banged and banged and crashed. And we had a break. We just took the ceiling out. So that was better. Okay, have the next slide, please, James. Now, the other thing we do, we had the local people volunteer so the students could come and actually get the skills they need. The Syrians were particularly delighted with permaculture because the Syrians were very good farmers and gardeners. And they would say, we can use this knowledge when we go home. But in this case, what we've got in mind, and we don't always tell them our objectives, is partly meeting basic needs, in this case for food and fertilizer and water, but also when hard time comes, they're backed up because we're building disaster risk and preparedness and recovery into everything we do now for everyone. And then they're also caring for their land better by building soils and getting greater productivity. So again, we mix up people, we find the women stand back and they let the men take the tools. We don't say anything, we just take the spade from the man and go over and give it to this woman and say, would you like to have a go now? Nothing has been said, but suddenly we've got this interaction and people working together. You can put any comments up. Okay, next one, please, for peace. Turkey. So here there are 80%. Turkey has 5 million refugees. Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria, Kurds, a number of ethnic groups. In this case, we're in another glass house, and we just simply put out all the vegetables and ask them to put them in families, identify the seeds, put them in classes together and work together. And you see, you don't have to do a lot with this method because they have the knowledge, but what we do is we add to what they didn't know. Okay, why this is peace? While we were there, it was the 6th year since the war started in Syria. And one of the women said, tomorrow is the 6th year since they started bombing us and destroying our country. So that morning, we asked them if they'd want to come to a little memorial for their country and hope for the future, and they all said yes. And the women arranged to have candles, and we all sat in a circle and they lit candles for hope, and each one talked about either hope for the future or what is lost. May surprise you, but the women really, really regretted their children, particularly their daughters, losing a chance at being educated, because Turkey welcomes all children into primary schooling, but not secondary schooling. So their daughters were missing out on the education which their mothers felt was so important for them. And one woman really wept She said, I don't want my daughter picking fruit forever. They'll let her pick fruit, but they won't let her go to school. Our children are suffering. And now the next generation, when we are grandmothers, that next generation will not start from the education that we were getting for our children. And so often in these courses, people add that one more element of peace and peacekeeping, which is, of course, education for women. Next one, please, James. I don't know. This is the experiential learning. So we've just done a whole session here on retrofitting your container or house to make it energy sensitive. So what we're looking at is which way you'd orient it, and wind power and small solar panels and water tanks. And this is all they had to work with. But it was a fabulous exercise in how the men and women were working together to redesign their homes in the camps. And then we'd get them to redesign their traditional homes. So there were the two places they could redesign and make all the time. So sometimes we get people to teach someone. So we'd ask the woman on the left to teach the man on the right. We'd ask them to sing a traditional song. And fixed in my mind is an old Rohingya man. Really as thin as a toothpick. He was tiny and old and wizened. And I said to him, do you have any songs or anything for teaching how to look after the land and grow food? And the others been largely ignoring him because they were young, enthusiastic. He stood up and he sang this song, moving his feet to clear the land, drop a seed, put the soil over. Clear the land, drop a seed, put the soil over. And he did this dance down the middle of the class, teaching through singing. And we had it right on track to send someone there to register all his dances and all his songs so the Rohingya could have this knowledge when COVID broke out. So that was, with their traditional ways of learning are the ways that we want people to use, because to ignore First People's knowledge is violence against them, and to include them, as you know, creates that peace. And if people can't read and write, we get them to modern. People can't read and write, they can draw. Anyone can draw. They don't have to be able to write a word, and they do. And teaching each other's takes away from too much expertise by the teacher. Okay, we'll look at the next one, please, James. Now, this is a drawing. Anyone can draw. So if you have a look at that, the sun is not, the sun, they always put sun in the east. And no matter what I did, we couldn't get people traditionally put sun in the north and south. So it's obviously a daily rhythm. So you always put sun on the east, on the right of the drawing. And before, this was bare land. After, you have a look at what people can do to make a good environment. This is a dry, harsh environment. So down near the sun, you've got all the windbreak trees for harvesting and firewood. You've got the animal housing near the house. You've got a grain store. You've got solar panels. You've got a compost loo. You've got water stored. You've got chickens. So what has happened? People have gone from having very bare environments to be able to protect them and store water and grow a range of food. It's fabulous what people can do. It's amazing. That's why it's a wonderful thing to have the privilege of being a facilitator and teacher with people, because while it's going on and then you ask them to draw, you don't know if people can do anything. But when you see something like this, you know they'll go home and do it, or they'll do it on the edge of the camp, or they'll do it if they go to Romania or end up in Turkey. It's fabulous. Okay, please, James, that would be lovely. Okay, so then we go outside and we learn lots of things. So what can you see in that? It's not a very good photo because I'm not a good photographer. So we've got a whole class out there. Thank you. So see the white bags, they're what the rice comes in from the UN, and you'll see the lid of a bucket on the ground in the middle, that's UN. And actually the local market had all the UN stuff in it and the locals were buying it too. And that was wonderful. So we get them to use the white, look down towards the bottom near the chat, and you'll see a white bag. We just got people to build a sack garden. Can you see it? So there's tomato, and then they'll plant maybe an onion or two, or some herbs, or some coriander, some beans, 3 or 4 plants in a sack garden. Now they're just the right size to go outside a tent or pavilion. And then along the roofs of the houses, we get them to hang containers. This group up near the top, above the red bucket, they're learning how to stop the water pouring down onto the local level. So they're intervening so the water's carried away from the steps each side and soaks in and doesn't become a river. The group up top are doing classical compost making with what they've got. So we give each group an activity, and every 20 minutes we circulate them. And we get them to practice. So it's a skills festival. And then they all talk about what they've learned. So everyone gets to try building a swale, using an A-frame, designing water collection systems. And gradually you design yourself out of the course, and no one wants to listen to you anymore because they want to listen to each other. Okay, let's see the next one, please, James. So this was the teaching space in a refugee camp in Kurdistan. Right, so you'll see I'm not even in the picture. So what we've done is get groups to present their findings. So what happened this day, someone had lost the key to the classroom and we were locked out. So we simply had to try and get some chairs and sit in the dirt and the sun. They all agreed. I said, well, if we can't go in the classroom, where shall we go? And everyone agreed this was the best place because those decisions have to be made by the class. Now, this was funded by World Vision, and I considered it a failure because World Vision didn't have any staff except the translator involved in this course, and I thought it would die. And I thought it was really useless. So that was 2 years ago. About 6 weeks ago, I got an email from the chap from World Vision who'd gone back to live in Romania, and 30,000 Syrians are being resettled in Romania, and he wants them all to do permaculture. And I thought it was a waste of time and no one took anything away. Some of these people have gone home to Syria where it's safe and okay. And they said at the learning, I can use this information at home. And remember, they'd been drawing their own homes because you don't forget home and how they'd improve them. So what was amazing about this is what I'd written off as a failure. And in development terms, not one person really made a garden. And nothing happened in the camp, but it's all happened onwards. And it's very staggering because it looks as if the camps are becoming centres to send permaculture out in various ways. 2 people from Turkey, 2 French women who were part of that course, went to the Sudan and Congo to work in camps there, and that was a surprise. Not because they're French speaking, but I didn't know they were going to do it. So the outcomes are quite extraordinary. And these people going home, that you can see, they will have better food, better water, more self-sufficient, an idea of a local economy, disaster plans for next time. And I think that they always say they feel better in themselves. Okay. I'm sorry I'm talking so much, everyone. This is the last one. So this is what happened on the edge of the refugee camp in Bangladesh, and I'm not showing you all the tents. Just beyond this farmer here, this refugee, are the fields of the local farmers. And what they did was they took every space and every can and every container, and they grew beans and they grew corn and they grew potatoes and they grew everything. And a whole neighborhood in that camp, 50,000 people, a camp of about 2,000, it spread. So we taught about 2 courses, about 30 people, local people and refugees, and then we went whoosh, and it just spread. And then, of course, this camp was burnt down, and then COVID came and everything has stopped. So that's sort of some of the things that happen to try to bring peace, but it's not the stop the wars so much peace. It's equipping people to live better and not be so vulnerable to the peace, to the violence that's acted against them. I think some exciting initiatives that I think you would love is one that's going on in the African refugee camps where you can have 700,000 people. And Morrow, Australian permaculturist from the Ethos Institute, is teaching permaculture courses into that camp in English, because East Africans are English, and they're teaching in English by mobile phone. So here they are with the phone and the videos teaching refugees. Now the contagion is enormous, where she's also supplying little hand video cameras with rechargeable batteries. People are taking photographs of what they're doing. They're going through the camps. They're showing how it happens. If you look up the Ethos Foundation, look at Morag's work, because it's the future for getting information and results from people doing brilliant work without having to do face-to-face. And COVID has had some really terrible, deleterious impacts, but in terms of teaching permaculture, it's taken away to some degree. Yep, the colonial model of people like myself going and teaching, and we're working with Malaysia. They've got 5 million Myanmar people there, ethnic minorities, the Philippines, we're talking about Africa, we're talking about Greece, and people writing their own PDCs according to the particular situation they're in. Let me give you just one example and we'll finish. So in Bangladesh, 2/3 of the land is 1.5 meters above sea level. And they get cyclones and huge storm surges. And the best coastal disaster work in the world, little known, is going on in Bangladesh. They need a PDC, a permaculture design course, in which right from the beginning, they're talking about water. They learn the ordinary stuff, and at the end, the exercise is, how will I manage water in my environment from what I've learned? How will I manage water in terms of my housing from what I've learned about natural building and sustainable housing? How will I learn to keep my animals given the water disasters we suffer? How can I? So they relate their learning to the disasters. That is a fantastic thing. If we look at the Philippines, where they have cyclones, floods, volcanoes, earthquakes, our earthquake was nothing, civil war at Morrow, right? So if you look at all those, they are going to teach PDCs in ethnic languages directly to people, probably by phone, on islands, and that permaculture design course, water, soil, air quality, disaster planning will be about the most likely local disaster. It would work here. It would be very good. Okay, so that is a long time and you're very good. Do you want to just stand up a bit? And then we'd like you to think about what you've been learning. And if you're willing to talk to people in chat rooms, if you're willing to do that, that would be wonderful. So perhaps I could ask James to put people into chat rooms. They're quite arbitrary. Just have a talk about what has struck you about. Look, it's always aimed at the least able and the most vulnerable. And I see permaculture as being a tool. It's not about the bigger institutions at all. So it's quite modest. Okay, James, perhaps people could have about 10 minutes in chat rooms or a little less and then come back. If you're willing to do that, please.
You should be going into your rooms now.
Mm-hmm. I've been invited. I'm not going to. Mm-hmm. Good things, really good.
Gradually filling up.
Good, okay. People can take the conversation in where they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
so about 1:45, we will bring them back, yeah?
Yes, that would be fine.
Yep.
Thanks, James. Yeah. Was that too long talking, James?
It was probably longer than you budgeted for, but it was beautiful. Like,
yeah.
it's just such, I mean, like the soil, it's such rich material. But yeah, I don't think there were, so where are we at now?
Hopefully people in rooms and they're talking, introducing themselves and talking.
Yeah.
Getting good responses in the chat room.
Yeah, so there's about 1/4 hour for half an hour's final set of materials according to your schedule, like the 10, 11 and 12 on your...
Yeah, okay, so
yeah.
10-minute debrief for chat room. Then do you think, could we hear people? Look, that Rohingya in order, that's a whole story. Unless he can contact me later, I can't do it now.
Yeah, I mean, you could do a direct chat message to him if you wanted to.
I'll do
send
that
contact
now.
details.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what's his? Matthew
Ross.
Matthew Ross.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it can.
It says everyone. Jackie, James, Madonna. I haven't got him there. It doesn't come up.
Maybe you'll have to wait until after the chat rooms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe when he comes back.
Yeah. But yeah, I think so. We got how many? We got 7 rooms.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, just invite people from sort of room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and yes, so someone can unmute and just sort of talk for a minute or something like that.
Yeah, from each group can just unmute and talk for a minute. That would be good. Okay, thank you.
And then you've got, I mean, not really much room for questions, but there might be some things that are sort of come out through that process. Yeah.
All right. Okay, or they'll solve them with each other. You see, really, I'm a teacher, James, so I just teach.
No kidding.
All the time. So, you know, my idea is put them in, and then normally I'd walk around and say, you're listening to each other. Does everyone feel comfortable about talking? You know, you can talk if you want to. And that's what would be happening. And then they don't want to come back if you give them enough time, because they're still talking. And you say, you ready to come back? And they say, no. You ready to come back? No, this is important. So, you know, you're actually handing over to them. By the end of a course, they don't know if you're in the room or not. You know, they're all so busy discussing stuff. But I'm working on a program called Alternatives to Violence, which may be represented in this Raising Peace Festival. I don't know. But I analysed the elements of it, and it's let people make sure everyone's listened to well and everyone has a chance to talk. And that's the essential, and talk to each other. So they all talk to everyone else in the time. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. I was nervous about this because I so much love the face-to-face. And you can see the responses and welcome someone to develop what they were saying. And like the group, are you interested? Yeah.
I think that, like, I mean, the story was told so beautifully there, and the way, you know, the World Vision example and how that has sort of spread in ways you weren't expecting, I think is really interesting. I used to work for World Vision, so I was quite interested in that.
Did you?
Yeah.
I worked for them in Albania. Where did you work for them?
Well, I was always based here, but so with World Vision Australia for several years, and then I switched across the international office, and I was their policy lead on fragile states. For 5 years until 2015. You know John Mackenzie from Melbourne.
Yep. Yeah. And Tom Sizer, I went to Albania with for World Vision. And, you know, I thought that had collapsed and nothing had happened. And just before they had the International Permaculture Conference in London, 2015, I looked up permaculture in Albania. They've started nurseries and they're running bushland things and they're doing regeneration. Not all of them, but a central core group has stayed together and significantly assisted some of the outcomes in Albania. And I was rocked because I didn't think it was going to happen. It was really terrific. You know, the outcomes from these things are unpredictable. Yeah. You know, in Vietnam, we're invited by FAO to teach trainers who went through half the provinces of the country and taught short courses. And I said to someone recently, with the Chinese bringing all the pesticides and all the chemicals, what's it done to Vietnam? And they said, but look, it kicked off food security for Vietnam bigger and better than the government could do at that time. When the people were starving and been living on small amounts of rice for years, that program went right through the whole country and it was highly significant. And then, of course, you got industrialization and machines and things, and now they're going back to it, regretting the time difference. So outcomes are not something you can pick, and that's one of the criticisms I've got of the development game in general. It sets out all your outputs and outcomes, and then often they're not so predictable. Yeah. Success and failure is a very arbitrary concept sometimes. Yeah. Okay. So 11:43. When it clicks to 11:44, I'll press the recall button so people don't have a minute to come back in. Okay, so my watch is fast, and it won't matter if there are no questions. Doesn't matter if we finish. James.
I just left my room. Now I was just with one person, and now she's back here with us too. Cool. So just thought I'd let you know, and I don't know why we're only two people together. Just luck. I don't quite know why it's spread out that way. The last uneven number. We're down to 16 participants, though. Does that include the chat room? No, 16. That's the people who didn't go into a chat room. Okay. All right. Who chose not to for whatever reason. So, okay. I'm going to close the room. So in 60 seconds, we'll be back. So, James, are we asking people, someone from each group to speak? Yes. How many groups were there? Probably 6, I would say, given that Ruth's one, unless you did talk about some stuff, Ruth. But, I could mention, out of that, Yep, 7. Okay, and then perhaps, Ruth, you could just ask someone from group 1 to speak. They've often forgotten their group numbers, though. But anyway, let's see how it goes. Someone from another group. I don't know what group number I was. There you go. I was, yes, I was in room. Okay, so we just start with group 1, room 1. Okay, and looks like there were only 3 people in that room because a lot of people didn't join. Yeah, they stayed out. Okay. Yeah, some had 6, some had 3, some had 4. Nice comments, Ruth.
So yeah, and you need to, you're going to send a message to Matthew Ross directly to follow up with him.
Sorry?
You're going to
Yes.
message Matthew, yeah.
Yeah. Ruth, would you mind going down to messages where it says everyone and look up Matthew Ross and say, here's Rose's email address, romorrow@gmail.com.
Okay.
And he can contact me about that later, because it's a big story. It went all the way to Oxford University anthropology department, who were going to send someone out to record it, and then they had COVID. So it's interesting.
Right.
We've got it recorded on tape. Jed did it.
Do contact them directly?
Yep.
Well,
Oh,
if
no.
you just look at everyone where it's, because I'm not
everyone's back now, so
everyone's
Okay.
back.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right. Thank you. All right. Well, what we'd like to do, we'd like to hear from someone in each room, please. The sorts of things you discussed and your reactions to all that talk and pictures.
My name is Philip. In our group, there was five of us in our group, and I made a few notes as we spoke. We spoke about how music and acting can be a wonderful way to get people connected. One of our members had been to Bangladesh and used a variety of things there, and what also came up was how using mulch, using waste to convert and then become into mulch. And it was a communal thing. One idea came up which wasn't mentioned earlier, which I think is great, certainly within Australia, and that is to get councils involved in this type of thing, which I thought was a really, really powerful thing. Also, welcome dinners is another thing too, where people from different countries bring different foods and they then talk about their foods. So there's another way of connecting with each other. And the last thing was one lady was on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and where people were bringing seeds across, and they can plant seeds and get their own thing going. So it was a nice little gathering. It was very good. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That was terrific. Good ideas there. I could discuss. We always share meals, by the way. Always. It's a good principle. Maybe someone from the next group, please. Another group. Even if you've forgotten the number, let's hear from you.
Group 2?
Well, I don't know what number my group was, but we mainly talked about how profound your teachings are, Ro, and permaculture in itself, but also the way you bring it forward and the way you teach it. It's very profound and very gentle and respectful, and we're all blown away by it, by your presentation.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I can, in case other people in my group want to speak, please feel free to do that. So in our group, we talked about how, it is a good way of bringing communities together. Permaculture is something that brings out the generative side of human beings. So it can also act as a distraction in the middle of conflict. And just the act of communicating can bring people to a better understanding. And then we talked about, how it has, implications, more like indirect implications for peace in general. And then there was this, side discussion on how there are these barriers as well because of the population growth and things like that. And then we started talking about why that is and how that can be countered. Yeah. So if anybody wants to add to that,
I have to put it on mute.
Okay, I say a word from our group 2. We were noticed, yeah, very moved by what. Whoops, are we finished?
I can't hear you very well.
Oh shoot. Yeah, okay. This is group 2. We were very moved by everything. It is such an respectful, humble, inclusive way of being a human being with other human beings and taking vulnerability and risks on your own shoulders, and supporting really the locals to take charge of the situation in so many ways, and thus being surprised how it can spread around beyond any expectations. There's no control mechanism. It is just giving and sharing. And so it can grow and blossom beyond what you expected. But your own suffering is also on the line. You have to be willing to really learn and face the difficulties and work through with what you know is working when you empower other people to do it. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I'm not good at, thank you, Maria. I'm not good at seeing danger. It's what everyone else has every day in their lives. So I'm just sharing their lives.
Yes.
Not putting myself in danger any more than anyone locally.
No, no.
I thought thank you very much. There was someone else.
I think it was Diane. Diane?
Diane. Yeah, thank you, Ro, for your contribution. I saw permaculture principles in action in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh before the borders closed. I was working with UNHCR as a part of the Rohingya response, and I saw a very desperate situation of about 1.5 million Rohingya people. And in Camp 10 and in Camp 17, I saw the roofs covered with pumpkins, where permaculture groups had gone and taught the refugees to use the sewerage to grow vegetables. And in that terrible, fragile disaster, that was giving hope to the people, where the people got up and watered the plants, and there were these beautiful fruits that were coming up, and in a very, very, very conflict-ridden situation with lots of tensions between the UN and the local people, as well as the two different major players, Bangladesh and Burma. There was this sense of hope in the camps. So
Thank you so much, Diane. Ruth and I were there at the same time over several weeks teaching a few courses, and we were co-teaching. The interesting thing is the other NGOs, because we're working for Bangladesh Association of Sustainable Development, BASD, the other NGOs came to them and said, why is your project so successful? So BASD lent their trainers to other NGOs to train. That wasn't in our project proposal.
Yeah.
But they said, well, we can train you and you can do it. And then they also took great groups. It was probably the best project. We taught 30 and everyone had to go and teach 50 in the next 4 weeks, and had 2,000 people doing it in the shortest of time. If I told people in my street they had to teach 50 people in the next 2 weeks, they'd say, don't be silly.
Yeah.
You know, it's a fabulous attitude and wonderful. So COVID's been heartbreaking. And so has the death of chickens and the floods and the fires. So, you know, you really just think if they just need to go somewhere, they just need a chance to break from natural disaster and human created disaster. Thank you for those comments and that feedback. I didn't know that. I'm very grateful to have it.
So thank you very much, because also where the UN officials were having a lot of tension and couldn't manage the conflict, there were these seeds of hope amongst the people with simple initiatives from grassroots and the principles that go around that whole idea. So that was very empowering to see.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Lovely, Ruth, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And it was wonderful to see the hope that came with that, and how the mood changed in that camp and how it spread around the district, the whole region of camps. So they passed the knowledge on and inspired other people to do the same.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else? No, not anyone else. That's not non-violent. Would someone else like to speak? Can I invite someone else to speak about their impression, or we can just go straight to questions? We've only got a few minutes left. Someone else got a comment? Anything you'd like to say?
I'll just speak for my group. I was just talking with Rosemary. Is it Marie Rose or Rosemary? Sorry, we were just one very small group. And she just said that she was working in church, for the church and for schools. She works as an aide in schools. And she, through the Catholic Church, she was interested to know about living classrooms. And I think it's good to bring this in because children are so receptive to this kind of stuff, and it can come straight into our schooling now. So I put up the link for living classrooms, and it might be good to have a look at how you can bring it into your own community.
Wouldn't it be fabulous to have the parents learning with the children? So multi-age, families learning together or something within that. But anyway, that sounds wonderful to me. Okay, thank you, Ruth. Who else has got a comment? Something you'd like to talk about? Okay, well, look, we're probably going to finish. That's a huge amount of commentary, and it's really wonderful. Diane, you say what you take from the earth, you must give back. We're saying,
Yes,
more back to the earth than you take. Put more water in the soil than
that's
you
right.
take. Right, that because we've taken so much this generation, we have to put back.
Yes.
Okay, there was one last slide which I missed, but that was to thank you all for coming here today, to thank James and all the other organisers for a fabulous festival of peace. And I think there've been wonderful areas and things sort of from the grassroots to institutional to solutions. And can I encourage you, please, to have a look at education, the future of the peace movement. I want to give peace a dance tomorrow. I can dance away here all by myself because I'm a lousy dancer, and just follow up on some other sessions. You've been fabulous participants. If you hadn't put stuff in the chat room, I feel bereft. So thank you for your contributions. It's quite wonderful, and your attention. And I will again say the acknowledgement from the Gundungurra people, which is thank you for coming here today. Yangu Ora, Mandu Gidi Garanji. Thank you for coming here today, and I hope the rest of the day is really good for you, and we're really fired up to work for peace in whatever ways we can. Thank you. Thank you, James. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, all the people who have been learning with us over the past so many years. Very grateful.
Ro,
Yeah.
can I just say that Give Peace a Dance follows this session today?
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. Lovely. Thank you, Gil. All right. Okay. So thanks, everyone. A dance might be just the thing.